good evening. Welcome. On behalf of AmCham Sri Lanka, it's my pleasure once again to welcome you to a signature IPR event. Today is sharing with us his vast knowledge on IPR, on data protection, and what it means to us as a business community. We have a very interesting and eminent personality. Lakshmanan Jayakumar, attorney at law, is going to be sharing with us today his take and his knowledge on data protection, where we stand right now, and of course, where we are headed as a nation. What is data protection? Why is it needed? What is the current situation in Sri Lanka regarding data protection? And of course, the salient points of the proposed data protection or the Data Protection Act, which is currently under review. Now, to give you a brief introduction with regard to Lakshmanan Jayakumar, Lakshmanan is a counsel currently, senior counsel at the chambers of Dr. K. Kanagiswaran, President's Counsel, and he holds a Master of Commercial Law from the University of Colombo, and of course is an attorney at law enrolled in the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka, holding years of experience in corporate law, commercial law, of course, intellectual property, telecommunications, admiralty, banking and finance, insolvency, and of course, public law, and arbitration in international and domestic arbitration both. Lakshmanan comes to you with, or brings to you, his vast knowledge of many, many years. Lakshmanan, let me hand over to you to take us through this interesting and educating presentation that you have prepared for us. On behalf of AmCham Sri Lanka, thank you for accepting our invitation, and of course, over to you.
Thank you very much, Rai, for the kind words and for the invitation. Good evening, everybody. Quickly, today's topic deals with data protection as where we stand as a country. Sadly, we have no data protection laws as such in Sri Lanka, but like all things that are brought about by technological advances, we seem to be, as far as the technology is concerned, we seem to have kept abreast fairly reasonably. But the framework or the legislative and legal framework for it, of course, has not been as prompt in keeping up to speed. So today we'll look at, from what my perspective of what data protection is, where we stand, and more importantly, why we need it, so to speak, moving forward. And from there, most of you all would be aware that there was a data protection law that was proposed, I think 2, 3, 4 years ago, and it's in the form that it was proposed, it was fairly comprehensive. It dealt with in a fairly robust way in what the possible requirements could be, but it still hasn't seen the light of day, because my understanding is that several stakeholders had certain issues with it, and so it's still on the drawing table. And but we are, as a legal community, we are fairly confident that it will come out soon, and it will fill a much needed gap in our legislative framework. So if I may just start with okay, so I've titled this Data Protection, Where Do We Stand and Where Are We Headed? Okay, so privacy is an universally recognized right. It's in fact recognized in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 12 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights proclaims that there shall not be arbitrary interference with privacy, family, home, or correspondence. Everyone has the right to the protection of the laws against such interference. So from as far back as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we've had a recognition the world over that privacy which we will see lends itself to data protection, is an integral part of our life. Okay. So the right to privacy itself is multifaceted, but it has several aspects. The most common aspect is that people often say that what you do in your house stays in to a certain extent, that people can't intrude and things like that. But that's just one aspect of it. But more on point with what we are looking at today is our data. Everything these days revolves around data. So we are looking to see how the right to privacy, as manifested in the data protection principles, deals with data protection, deals with our right to privacy in that aspect. So as early as 88, 30 or over 30 years ago, it was recognized that the gathering and holding of personal information on computers, data banks, and other devices, whether by public authorities or private individuals, must be regulated by law. So, I mean, 30 years ago, fairly, early days of the technological boom, or the dot-com bubble, or the dot-com industries, the knowledge economy, as far back as that, they've realized that this data is going to be a matter of grave concern to all of us. Every individual should have the right to ascertain in an intelligible form whether, if so, what personal data is stored in automatic data files and for what purposes. That's of course a critical thing that is a matter of concern to all of us even now, because often we sign up for things, we give our data freely, not quite considering what the ramifications for it. I mean, case in point was I believe a lot of people were put off by WhatsApp asking for their certain their new change of terms of policy, which most people were concerned had privacy or data protection implications. Well, I signed on for it. I agreed, because to my mind, I thought, okay, not really having any nuclear codes on my WhatsApp, so it really doesn't matter. But in the long run, I mean, in hindsight, maybe I should have been a little more circumspect. But these are the things that we let go. I mean, it kind of slips under our radar, and then before we know it, maybe we've shared too much of ourselves online, right? So every individual should also be able to ascertain which public authorities or private individuals or body control or may control their files. If such files have been collected or processed contrary to the provisions of law, every individual should have the right to request rectification or elimination. So these are fundamental principles that have been recognized for a long time. The Constitution of Sri Lanka does not explicitly or expressly recognize privacy as a fundamental right, but it does state in Article 14A, which deals with the right to access information, that right can be restricted on grounds of privacy. Similarly, the Right to Information Act, which is which flows from the Constitution and is, shall I say, the enabling act, also provides that personal information may be denied if the disclosure of it has no relationship to any public activity or interest, or which would cause unwarranted invasion of privacy of the individual, right? Unless the larger public interest justifies, so on and so forth. So while we've not really expressly recognized in Sri Lanka that right to privacy is a fundamental right, of course, in certain jurisdictions it is recognized as a fundamental right, but Sri Lanka as of now hasn't. But certain restrictions are imposed on other aspects, keeping in mind this right to privacy. Okay. So this right to privacy also includes the ability of individuals to determine who holds the information about them and how that information is used. Thus, privacy and data protection are intrinsically linked, right? There is, of course, a general thought that sometimes that these two are complementary of each other, that better data protection leads to better control of right to information, that there is no misuse and vice versa. But of course, the dangers are always in the excesses of any person, be it the government or the private sector or the government sector, or even individuals for that matter, right? However, the increasing volume and use of personal data and the emergence of newer and newer technologies which allow newer ways of processing mean that regulating effective data protection is more important than ever. Especially since we all know governments and companies are, it's a part of innovation that to develop new systems, new policies to mine data from individuals, because there is value in it, and you can't stop people from going down a path where there is value in it, both monetary and otherwise. So, right. And of course, as most of us would realize from 10 years ago to now, the amount of data that we are volunteering is massive. It is, we willingly give it without often thinking as to the ramifications of it, because most of us, to a certain degree, have not been subjects of any data breaches or any negative outfall of sharing our data online. But in places or in countries where this data has been used for financial frauds or any other activities that are not proper, then of course it's only when it hits close to home we realize, right? So everything we do generates data, whether we have a device or not. Our devices, networks, even homes generate vast amounts of data. Our transport system, cars, payment system, and cities also generate data through us and about us. Especially when all of this becomes linked into one global system, then it's easy to map out not just physically, but other aspects of life. So while we embrace new technology in making our lives easier, cleaner, more sustainable, and so forth, well, it could also lead to a negative aspect of it, which we don't often give thought to. Okay, so the other aspect is that the process, systems, and procedures which process and collect data can also be used to generate additional data, right? And then can be used to predict and make decisions about people. So this is often what we keep in mind, or what we refer to as profiling. That if A, B, and C do they do certain things in a predictable manner, then you try to profile or map what they're trying to do and things like that. Okay. Then with data intensive systems, often governments and businesses see new opportunities for surveillance, income generation, and control. So it's like any other opportunity. When someone sees an opportunity to make money or whatever out of it, people will grasp at it. Okay. And also important is that our devices and infrastructure are being designed for data exploitation. Increasingly, it is beyond the ability of individuals themselves to control the ways in which data about their lives is shared and processed. Data protection thus empowers us to control our data and to protect us from abusers. So the idea is that we need to have control over our data. The fact that we share it, I doubt is something that we can go back on. Now we've come too far down the road to be able to be meaningfully engaged in our lives and society without sharing some or substantial part of data about us. But the question is, can we control it? Can we ensure that it's not subject to abuse? Okay. So just what is data protection? Data protection is commonly defined as the law or legal regime designed to protect your personal data. It's a process of safeguarding important or any information actually from corruption, compromise, or loss. Data protection is about safeguarding our fundamental right to privacy by regulating the processing of personal data, providing the individual with rights over their data, and setting up systems of accountability and clear obligations for those who control or undertake the processing of data. So it's all about making sure that we keep it in a manner that is meaningful, secure, and at the end of the day that we have control over it. We might relinquish whatever control we relinquish, that we relinquish willingly, and that it's not being used to being used to do more than it is meant to do. So then I found this quote, quite apt. Unless data protection rules are in place, they, government, private sector, you, me, anyone, will endeavor to collect it all, mine it all, keep it all, share it with others while telling us nothing at all. So we would be entirely in the dark, while our data will be used for a whole heap of things for which we have no control or safeguard over, right? Okay, so this is again reiterating what we looked at. Why do we need data protection law? I mean, especially in Sri Lanka, I'm sure there are a lot of business process outsourcing and things like that here, but we have no statutory regime for, you know, from a business perspective that looks to see whether it's being done properly, right? I mean, if some foreign company asks, you know, what is the legal framework for, you know, data processing in Sri Lanka, we technically have nothing, right? So, but coming back to a more personal aspect of it, every time we use a service, buy a product online or register for email, go to a doctor, pay our taxes, enter into any contract or service, we have to hand over some personal data. So even without our knowledge, data and information about us is being generated and captured by companies and agencies that we are likely to have never knowingly interacted with. I think a case in point is often most people tell me these days, and I also don't, I'm also in the same boat, that half the time I don't look at my SMS messages because it's full of spam. I mean, however much you block, every day some blooming spam keeps coming, and from people that I've never interacted with. So clearly my data has been collected by somebody for whom I have shared, you know, willingly shared it, but then it's being shared with somebody else for whom I know nothing about or to whom I have never given consent, and you get spammed with all kinds of messages, right? So the only way we as citizens and consumers can have confidence in both government and business is through strong data protection practices with effective legislation to help minimize state and corporate surveillance and data exploitation. Okay. So the sheer volume of data generated and the rapid development of technology, including sophisticated profiling and tracking and artificial intelligence, means that some existing data protection laws are out of date and unfit to deal with processing as it currently functions. So I was reading this article about China and how they're using their CCTV cameras and, you know, mapping faces to identify whether a certain individual was here or there, and, you know, whether if he did something, you know, that was what they would deem antisocial, that they would have a social scoring index and things like that. So I mean, you could possibly, with the increasing of, you know, CCTV and things like that and all that, you could probably, your entire day could be tracked and you would have no idea that someone has been mapping your every move. So Sri Lanka has no data protection legislation as it stands. If there is a violation of privacy by the wrongful use of personal data, the remedy for breach of individual privacy is found in the Roman Dutch law, which is our common law, in the form of an action for injury under the Actio Injuriarum, which is a general remedy for wrongful invasion of personal rights with regard to dignity and reputation and made intentionally. So basically, the problem would be if there is a violation of your data by somebody, you'll have to come and try to pitch it into these old Roman Dutch law concepts. And while it should be wide enough to, you know, be able to fit into it, the problem is that when there are new technologies, whether once it's argued that it won't fit into the old Roman Dutch law, then it becomes a nightmare as to seeing whether it can be done. So that's why when things keep moving, you probably need to have you know, keep up with the times as far as the legislation of things is concerned as well. So this our failure, I mean, we are in 2021 and we are still, you know, lacking at least a mandatory or a rudimentary data protection law is a critical failure, which I say is a critical failure to reflect upon the new potential for data processing which emerged with the advancement of technologies and which were deployed and embedded with governance systems and business models. A strong data protection framework will empower individuals, restrain harmful data practices, and limit data exploitation. It is thus essential to provide the much needed governance frameworks. One of these aspects of things like data protection is it's often, you know, it's an often quoted example. It applies to other instances as well, that it's like having the oxygen in the room slowly being sucked out till you're gasping for breath. You won't know, but then, you know, then by then it's too late. So these things need to be in place as we keep moving along in the technological landscape, so that we at no point are we left, you know, with nothing to do, and that we are entirely at the mercy of people who have our data. Okay. So the important aspect of is that those persons who process data must know what their obligations are, right? Because it's in a sense it's unfair to expect them to do more than what is necessary. Generally speaking, obligations are cast upon people either by law or by contract. So if you have no contract with someone who takes your data to protect it or to do the necessary safeguards for it, and there is no law obliging them or mandating that they must do something, then nobody will do it. I mean, that's the way things are. I mean, why would nobody is so altruistic as to go beyond what is required to do something beyond that. So unless you have by contract or by the operation of law that there are obligations cast upon people processing data, they would not. So it is that is why that the Data Protection Act also would make clear to people what their obligations are. So it is also important so that the obligations of those processing data are clear, so that they take measures to protect personal data, mitigate interference with the right to privacy, and are held to account when they fail to comply with obligations, especially when it comes to our personal data, right? So it's only fair by them as well. Okay, so data protection ensures that these obligations are imposed on those processing data, personal data, in both public and private sector, and strong enforcement powers can be used against those who breach these obligations and protection. So unless you have a good deterrent, a lot of these things are often difficult to enforce, right? Therefore, in modern societies, in order to empower us to control our data and to protect us from abuses, it is essential that data protection laws restrain and shape the activities of person in possession of our personal and other data. Oops, there is a typo there. It says date. Okay. So now we have what do we need from our data protection law? So one of the fundamental principles is that there must be limits on the collection of personal data, right? That you can't say, okay, I just want to buy a loaf of bread. You can't ask someone who wants to buy a loaf of bread online to give all his, financial data and medical data. I mean, there must be limits, right? We'll look at it a little later on, and it should be obtained by lawful and fair means, as well as being done in a transparent manner. So you must do it lawfully and fair, and it must be in a transparent manner. They must tell you why they're collecting data and for what purposes, and what is the extent of the data that is being collected. Okay, the purposes for which the data and information is to be used should be specified at the latest at the time of collection. So ideally, in a perfect world, you would be told well in advance that we need this kind of data, blah blah blah, so and so. But at the worst, at the time of collection, and should only be used for those agreed purposes. Personal data can only be disclosed, used, or retained for the original purposes. That is, if they tell you they are collecting it for a purpose at the time of collection, it's only for that, unless of course there is consent of the individual or the law provides. Okay, and then important is that it must be deleted when no longer necessary for that purpose. If the data I give for a particular purpose is no longer necessary, then it must be deleted. They can't keep it and you mine it even further, monetize it, and use it in such way. Okay, personal data as generated and processed should be adequate, relevant, and limited to necessity of the purposes for which it is to be used. The data should be accurate and complete, and measures should be taken to ensure it is up to date. Reasonable security safeguards should be used to protect personal data from loss, unauthorized access, destruction, use, modification, or disclosure. So a lot of the time we don't quite look at the ramification if our data is destroyed. I mean, if for some reason our ID numbers or passports are wiped off from the system, and then we go to the bank or something and they want some identification, and we'd be nobodies in the sense that we'd be invisible to the invisible to the people that we deal with, right? Okay, there should be no secret processors of data, sources, or processing. Individuals must be made aware of the collection and processing of their data, as well as the purpose of its use, who is controlling it, and who is processing it. So this is one of these aspects you can see from those spam messages, that you give it to a person and you think that's only for them to get in touch with you. But the purpose is, no, they sell it to somebody else. Somebody else is controlling, somebody else is processing it. We don't know if it's unsold to somebody else. Those that use personal data must be accountable for and demonstrate compliance with above principles and facilitate and fulfill the exercise of these rights abiding by applicable laws that enshrine those principles. So one of the problems here is we have no laws, so it's pretty much a free for all. You share your data in good faith that it will not be sent to anybody else. Right now, I mean, any professional authority, any professional body would have a register of its members, and you hope that the professional body would not share your data with anybody else. But most often than not, sometimes when the professional body gets a sponsor of some sort, the one of the first things they do is they share your data, and then you get SMSs and emails or whatnot from all sorts of people asking that if you're interested in this or this is available and such and such. Okay, accountability should be at the core of any law regulating of the processing of personal data and the protection of the rights of individuals, and data protection rules thus need to be enforced by a regulator or authority. So there must be accountability. Moment any person, body, entity, whoever processes data, personal data, our data, anything, they must be accountable for it. If they are not, the whole purpose is lost, right? Okay, one of the best known data protection regimes is the GDPR of the European Parliament and of the Council. Most of us know it's comprehensive. It covers all personal data. It is also significant as its implementation will affect not only data controllers based in the EU, but also those that offer goods or services to or monitor the behavior of individuals based in the EU. So, I mean, it has, in that sense, a fairly large extraterritorial application. And one of the aspects is that the fines for a breach of the GDPR obligations is, top of my head, is you can be fined a certain percentage of your turnover, and fairly stringent and strong financial penalties for breach. Okay, so to sum it up, the principles of data protection are fair, is that the data collection must be fair, lawful, and in a transparent manner. It must be limited for the purpose for which it is being processed. That it must be the minimal data that is needed, that is out of, you test it against necessity and relevancy. Whatever data is being processed must be tested against necessity and relevancy. It must be accurate. There must be a storage limitation, as it must be limited to the period for which it will be in storage, and if it's no longer needed, it must be destroyed. There must be integrity and confidentiality of the data, that it must be, you must have the person having it must be of there must be integrity in the process, in the person handling it. Then it must be confidential, and finally that the person or processor must be accountable for it. Okay, so in how the general framework is that those of us who, when we volunteer our data or when our data is captured, we are referred to in most data protection regimes as data subjects. So we have the right to information, that we should know what data is being acquired from us. We have the right to access that data. We should be able to ask these people, the processors, I want to see what data of mine that you have. We can object to any data that we consider as not being appropriate. We have the right to rectify, to block, and to erase. We have rights related to profiling, that is, they can't take different aspects of our data and then try to profile and track and things like that. And automated decision making if the profiling or whatever is being done by an algorithm or any thing. Right to data portability, right to an effective remedy if we have any complaints regarding any of these, that there will be an effective remedy, and right to compensation if there is a breach of our rights. Okay. So in December 2019, there was a draft bill that was submitted to the cabinet, and it was, I believe, subsequently shared with several stakeholders and is being reviewed. Like I said, we await its enactment. The preamble to the bill observes that it has become necessary to provide for the regulation of the processing of personal data of individuals in order to safeguard the rights of individuals, and that it is a duty of the government of Sri Lanka to provide for a legislative framework to provide for mechanisms including safeguards for the purpose of protection of personal data of individuals while respecting domestic written laws and applicable international legal instruments. So the idea, what shall I say, intentions is very good. This is what we would want out of a Data Protection Act. So just a quick thing, like the Act specifically excludes any personal data processed purely for personal, domestic, or household purposes by an individual. It's fairly straightforward. Any data which has been irreversibly anonymized in such a manner that causes the individual to be unidentifiable. So if the data is anonymized in such a way that the individual cannot be identified, then the provisions of the Act will not apply to that. Okay. And this is an important one. Section 3(1) says it is applicable. So the Data Protection Act will apply where the processing of personal data takes place wholly or partly within Sri Lanka. So if any part of data processing takes place in Sri Lanka or partly within Sri Lanka, that is, it's partly processed abroad or partly done here, and then partly done here, they will be caught up under the provisions of the Data Protection Act or the proposed Data Protection Act. Then it is applicable where data processing is by a controller or processor who is domiciled or ordinarily resident in Sri Lanka, is incorporated or established under any written law of Sri Lanka, is subject to any written law of Sri Lanka, offers goods or services to data subjects in Sri Lanka, or monitors the behavior of data subjects in Sri Lanka, including profiling, with the intention of making decisions in relation to the behavior of such data subject insofar as such behavior takes place in Sri Lanka. So firstly, it covers anything that's done in Sri Lanka, which is you would think is fairly standard for any local legislation. The extraterritorial jurisdiction, of course, happens if even if it takes place wholly or partly within Sri Lanka. So even if a part of it is done, then it gets caught up with it. Then it offers goods or services to data subjects in Sri Lanka. So if the data collection and processing is done by somebody even from another country, but offering goods or services to data subjects in Sri Lanka, they would still be within the embrace of this proposed act. And if it monitors the behavior of data subjects in Sri Lanka, including profiling, with the intention of making decisions in relation to the behavior of such data subjects. So it's fairly broadly cast. So even if you're abroad and you monitor the behavior of data subjects in Sri Lanka with the intention of making decisions. So even if you don't make decisions, the intention to make decisions would be regarding the behavior of such data subjects would be enough to bring it within the act. Okay, so personal data is defined. I mean, fairly good. I mean, a good definition in the sense that most world over is accepted as being the definition means any information that can identify a data subject directly or indirectly by reference to an identifier such as a name, an identification number, location data, or an online identifier. One or more factors specific to the physical, physiological, genetic, psychological, economic, cultural, or social identity of that individual or natural person. So basically any data that can identify any person with sufficient specificity would be personal data. Then the Act deals with special categories of personal data, which is revealing racial or ethnic origin, political opinions, religious or philosophical beliefs, financial data, genetic data, biometric data. So basically anything that is beyond the ordinary personal data which is a little more, shall I say, personal in the sense of your thoughts and things like that become and biometric and things like that become special categories of personal data which impose high obligations on the Act. So the Act deals with, or the proposed Act has two sets of people, a controller and a processor. A controller is any natural or legal person, public authority, non-governmental organization, agency, or the body or entity, which alone or jointly with others. So anybody who determines the purposes and means of processing of personal data. So anyone who decides the how and the why and how and of processing personal data is a controller. Then a processor is any natural, legal, such and such which processes personal data on behalf of the controller. right? So if you decide all this and you let somebody else do the processing, he is a processor, you're the controller. Okay. A data subject is an identifiable natural person, alive or deceased, to whom the personal data relates. So it applies even to deceased. Identifiable natural person is one who can be identified directly or indirectly, in particular by reference to an identifier, which in reference to an identifier, including but not limited to a name, an identification number, location data, online, and so on and so forth. So basically, any human being would be an identifiable natural person, and an identifiable natural person would, in respect of whom the data relates, is a data subject. Okay. So the controller, most of the obligations are cast upon the controller in terms of the Act. He must ensure that the personal data is processed for a specified, explicit, and legitimate purpose, and such personal data shall not be further processed in a manner which is incompatible with such purpose. So the controller must ensure that the principles of specificity, that it shall not be processed beyond what is necessary, and all that is incorporated into the obligations cast on the controller. Must ensure that processing of personal data is adequate, relevant, proportionate, and not excessive, to the extent as is necessary in relation to the purpose for which such data was collected or processed. Must ensure that processing of personal data shall be accurate and kept up to date, with every reasonable step being taken to erase or rectify any inaccurate personal data without delay. Must ensure the integrity and confidentiality of personal data that is being processed by using technical and organizational measures as may be prescribed, including encryption, pseudonymization, anonymization, or access controls, so as to prevent the unauthorized or unlawful processing of personal data, or loss, destruction, or damage of personal data. Right. Now, one of the aspects is that consent must be obtained from the data subject prior to the data being processed, right? So conditions for consent are also spelled out in the proposed Act. The controller, so it's the onus is on the controller, should be able to demonstrate that consent has been given by the subject. The subject must be informed that consent can be withdrawn at any time. The request for consent should be in intelligible and easily accessible form, using clear and plain language. So this is, I think, an idea that you can't sneak it into the fine print in convoluted legalese and then say that was consent. If the request for consent concerns other matters, it should be given in a clearly distinguishable form. So you can't creep in to consent for something else, consent for doing something beyond that. In assessing consent, consideration will be given for whether the performance of the contract is conditional on processing data that is not necessary for the performance of the contract. So again, the idea is that the data that is being accessed will not be overused, or will not be that you will not access data saying you need it for A, B, and C, when in fact you don't need it for that, right? Then conditions for lawful processing of data, it's also set out in the proposed Act. Consent, and it's very clear that consent, though given, can be subsequently withdrawn by the data subject. That the data is necessary for performance of a contract the data subject is party to, or it's necessary for compliance with a legal obligation. It's necessary for any life-threatening emergency. It's necessary for a task carried out in the public interest or exercise of official authority. And there are additional conditions for processing of the special categories of personal data, which we saw earlier was on the lines of your political views and biometric data and things like that. So there are additional obligations. As far as the collection of data is concerned, at the time of collection, the controller must or shall inform the data of the identity and contact details of the controller. So you know who is the controller of your data. Then there must be the Act provides for the appointment of a data, or mandates the appointment of a data protection officer. So the details of the data protection officer, the intended purpose for data processing and the legal basis for it, the legitimate interest pursued by the controller in processing data, the categories of personal data that is being collected, the right to withdraw consent, and the process for same. So you must be told, okay, how do I get out of it? How do I opt out of it? right? And then you must be told exactly, okay, you send an email or you do this or you do that. Okay. Then you must also be informed of the recipients or third parties with whom the data will be shared. So you can't have one person taking it and then monetizing it with somebody else without telling us. If it's going to be done, we need to be told, right? Then any information regarding any cross-border transfers the controller intends to carry out. The cross-border transfer in terms of the act is when our data is sent out of Sri Lanka. So if it's going to be done, we need to be told. Then the period for which the data will be retained or the criteria for determining the period. So either we must know it will be for 6 months or till the car is serviced or till you own the car or whatever, some determinative period. Then whether the provisions of the data is statutory or contractual right, and the consequences if the data is not provided. Excuse me. So that is basically whether we need to give it because we are statutorily or legally obliged to do, or it's a contractual obligation that we have taken to provide it. And what happens if we don't give it? So only then we will be able to make a call. Okay, do we want to share the data or we don't? Right. Then rights of the data subjects is the right to withdraw consent, right to access. We saw some of this. Excuse me. Right to rectification or completion. Right to erasure if the processing of personal data is carried out in contravention of Section 5 or consent is withdrawn, or the data is no longer required for the purposes for which it was collected or processed. So all of those. Okay. Of course, these things loom large in any aspect of life. Our rights can be refused as data subjects or otherwise on consideration of national security, public order, inquiry, investigation, prevention, detection of criminal matters, if it impacts the rights and freedoms of other persons guaranteed under any other law. Then, of course, technical and operational feasibility, which is, of course, it's there in the proposed act, but the concern might, of course, be that those things can be a smoke screen for basically the reluctance to respect the rights of data subjects, or the inability of the controller to establish the identity. Okay. So data flowing out of Sri Lanka comes within the proposed act. Cross-border flows of data, which we just saw, means movement of personal data out of the territory of Sri Lanka. The general rule is that personal data are only processed in Sri Lanka and shall not be processed outside the territory of Sri Lanka. So if it's going to be done, there are certain obligations. Like I said, we'll hopefully get rid of this terrible spam that we all have to deal with. So no controller, whoever, shall disseminate unsolicited messages to any identified or identifiable data subject, right? So there you can't have unsolicited messages. Okay. So your controller may use telecommunication services, electronic or any other means for the purpose of disseminating messages only if a data subject has given consent to receive such messages, solicited messages. So if you can't have, like I said, you won't have spam. Of course, the problem is a lot of the time the spam is also for people we have signed up for. So then the next one is the important one. So when obtaining consent, data subject must be informed of the availability of and the details for opting out, right? So that, if we keep getting these spams, we know that we could get out of it. Okay, so from a business perspective, what would be additional costs? I mean, this is just the top of my head. I'm sure you all would have a lot more practical aspects of it as well. So every controller, you must designate or appoint a data protection officer, right? So that's if you don't have someone with the necessary skill set, then it has to be a senior staff member of the controller who has relevant academic or professional qualifications, which may include academic background, knowledge, and technical skills in matters relating to data protection. So you must have the right person. It might, if you don't have someone within an organization who fits that profile, then it of course involves going out and getting somebody. Then the data protection officer must ensure that if there is one, that there is no conflict of interest in the event he or she carries out other functions. So basically, you could always nominate someone who is within the organization to be the DPO, but you must ensure that he has or she has the academic or professional qualifications to deal with it. And secondly, that the function that he already carries or the multiple roles that he is going to carry will have no conflict of interest with his role as the data protection officer. So penalties for non-compliance, it says not in excess of 10 million. and the penalty is recovered via the magistrate court by an ex parte application, in the sense that the person against whom the non-compliance is alleged doesn't need to be made a party. Okay. Then this might be of some concern, is that if a company is guilty, then every director and other officer responsible with the management and control of the company at the time of the offense shall be liable for the penalty. So if the firm goes under, the director and every responsible officer who was in control of management or in control is liable. A firm is also guilty. If a firm is guilty, every partner at the time of the offense is liable, right? Of course, your defense is that you need to prove that you had no knowledge of the failure to comply, or that all due care and diligence was exercised to ensure compliance. So it goes beyond basically just the company and makes the individual directors liable as well. Okay. Some general thoughts on this is that there is always an inherent conflict between data protection and freedom of information. So it's always a fine balancing act. I mean, that you need to have data protection, but at the same time you must have freedom of information. But you need to strike a very fine balance between where you are and what needs to be done in respect of both. You need to have both, but it must be a fine balance between the two. Then intangible information has become an asset in today's information economy and personal data. And whether we like it or not, it comprises a substantial share of such information assets. So we need to be, we recognize that this intangible information or these personal data and things like that is a great asset. And of course, people will, of course, go after assets, but you need to have sufficient safeguards. Businesses are often valued on the basis of the personal data they hold, like registered users. I suppose WhatsApp would have been a classic case in point, which I believe they're trying to monetize now. But at the time Facebook bought WhatsApp, it was simply on the basis of the users that they had. Okay. Also, a philosophical sort of consideration is that there can be an over-reliance on consent as the basis for processing personal data. In the sense that, we might all willingly just, consent because, okay, we want to use WhatsApp. Everybody has WhatsApp, we give it. But this fails to recognize that privacy is both an individual right, but at the same time also of collective public interest. So just because everybody says, oh, I'll voluntarily give it, it might not be the best thing for public interest in the long run. But there's always that inherent tension, like between data protection freedom. If I want to share my data, what do I care about what it means for others, right? So, but also you realize that more and more people willingly share, the more and more likely that this data can be used for other purposes, or you could shut people out simply because they exercise their proper or lawful right that they don't want to share their data, right? Okay, so consent can overly individualize privacy, data protection. This is a matter of concern in our social media age, where we willingly hand over our personal data in exchange for free services. Okay, then then can we then be trusted to can we then be trusted to value our personal data privacy? I mean, I reading up for this, I thought, okay, I mean, I just signed on to the WhatsApp new terms of condition without even knowing only, and then even after realizing it, I thought, makes no difference, we go with it. So have I valued my personal data that I have handed over to them? Maybe not sufficiently, but like I said, so that's that it overly individualizes it, right? Another important requirement is that data protection laws must be tech neutral. Otherwise, we run the risk of the legal regime becoming redundant because of technological advances. So that's another aspect. I mean, the Act is fairly tech neutral in the sense that it is widely framed to encompass possible developments and things like that. It's an important aspect. Otherwise, if you become too tech specific, you run the problem of the Act becoming redundant and unwieldy in the because we're dealing with technological advances even in the short term. A case in point is probably Sri Lanka Telecommunication Act, if I remember right, was enacted in 91 and then amended in 96. So we are still carrying on with the Sri Lanka Telecommunication Act, though of course it's also ripe for overhaul and amendments and improvements. But the only thing that has saved it all these years from 96 to today is because it's been tech neutral. To that extent, it has been able to somehow or the other keep pace in a sense, because there hasn't been too much technological specificity in it, and we have been able to, generally speaking, the regulator has been able to whether it's 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, whatever, satellite communication, blah blah blah, all of that, somehow because the act was tech neutral, has been a blessing, so that we could move. If it was too tech specific, I mean, we would have been in a very difficult position. So to I guess, yeah, that's the end of the slideshow. Okay, so to cap it up or recap what I said, the right to privacy, of course, is a very broad concept. It deals with different aspects of our life, and it's an important part of our life. And there is no denying that at some point or the other, we all want our privacy. As against that, we test it against our requirements that in today's world, that we need to share our data to some extent or the other, and without which a lot of the services or even ordinary life, entertainment, all of that might not be quite the way we want it to be. So between those two inherent tensions is this middle ground, which protects our privacy by protecting our data, but at the same time allowing that the data that is collected is properly collected, processed properly, and that we have sufficient control over it to be able to, in a sense, pull out of that if we want to, so that we will not have hesitation in sharing the data and availing ourselves of the benefits that we could get from sharing that data. So to wrap up, I would think that my thinking is that the Data Protection Act is a big requirement right now, given the fact that the technology or the information economy is upon us, and that's probably where most of our growth probably in the future, we are hopeful, will come from. And given that, it's important to have a proper legislative framework that enables it and doesn't get in the way of these technological businesses and things like that. So that was just a quick overview of what data protection is, the right to privacy, and finally what the Act as it stands in the current form proposes to do. Hopeful that going forward that the Act will be enacted sooner rather than later, and that any amendments would be improvements and would not take away from the thrust and the purpose that the Act is seeking to achieve. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Lakshmanan, for a very insightful presentation. I think it was very detailed, and it provided quite an overview of where we stand, and of course where we should be going as well. Just a couple of clarifications that have come in on the question box. So one thing is, I mean, the framework or the frameworks that we are familiar with as corporates, as you mentioned, is the GDPR, of course. In addition to the GDPR, there is the California Privacy Protection Act. Also, I believe 2018, but more recently, I think came into effect 2020. Now, how does this affect businesses in Sri Lanka? There's this constant maybe question as to how, as Sri Lankan businesses, are we not affected, maybe is not the word I need to use, but do we fall under the purview of the GDPR? Do we fall under the purview of the California Privacy Protection Act?
Okay, so the long and short answer to it is that all legislation are territorial in their application. That is a fun basic premise, in that sense that Sri Lanka can't legislate for things that happen beyond its borders, right? Similarly, the EU, the American, California, whoever, their legislations are meant at face value to apply to things that happen within their border. But we are now no longer, our lives are no longer defined by the territorial borders of a country, because like the GDPR or any other statute for that matter, like I believe there is a certain anti-corruption, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, for example, says if anyone who does any foreign, who does a corrupt practice in any other country, if I'm not mistaken, could be charged for that in the United States. So as if you are dealing with, say, if I take the GDPR as the example, if you are dealing with citizens of the EU, then you are caught up by the provisions of the GDPR. The problem, of course, or what shall I say, not the problem, in any act, the key to it is enforcement, right? So the question is, if the EU regulator finds, say, a Sri Lankan company that services the EU or an EU citizen in breach of their obligations under the GDPR, what can it do, right? So you are caught up, but the question is, how does it impact upon you in a practical sense? If the regulatory authorities' sanctions can't reach you, then of course it's pointless. But if they can block you, or if they can do something to hamper your business if you don't comply, then of course you would be forced to comply. So I mean, the act in that sense, GDPR is extraterritorial because it's trying to apply itself to apply to people outside the EU. But the test for y'all would be as to what is your concern regarding enforcement. But it says you're liable if you service the EU. So in terms of the EU, you're liable. But if they can't enforce it against you, you wouldn't give it two thoughts.
So I suppose in that sense, it then comes down basically to the global supply chain and where you fall in terms of supply.
Exactly. So if at some point, you say basically, if they say, you have breached it or something, and then something in your business flows through the EU, and if the regulator has the power to, close that tap off for you, then you would be mindful. But, like anything else, if the EU's reach doesn't extend to you, then you wouldn't worry too much. But I mean, because today is such a interconnected world, it will be very difficult to escape in that sense. I mean, you'd be liable because I believe the GDPR, I think, says 4% or 10% of turnover can be the maximum penalty and things like that.
10%.
So so basically, if you have something that flows through the EU and you have an account or something, it probably could get, I'm not too sure the specifics of it, but you probably could get, caught up.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That's an explanation in terms of data protection, where it stands right now and where we need to go. Thank you, Lakshmanan, for taking the time. On behalf of FamCham Sri Lanka, of course, and on behalf of each of our viewers here, both on Zoom and on Facebook, we appreciate all your efforts in the presentation and, of course, in that clear and succinct explanation.
Thank you, Rai. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, AmCham, for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Our pleasure, and we'll see you again in a couple of weeks on the next session.
Yes.
So as we leave it at that, I bid you all a very good night. And of course, till we see you again, 23rd of March is the next of our signature IPR series. And we look forward to seeing you on that. Of course, more details will follow via our social media pages and, of course, the bulletin board. Until then, from the AmCham Sri Lanka team and, of course, our panelist for this evening, Mr. Lakshman Jayakumar, I wish you all a very good night. Stay safe and God bless. Bye-bye.